Right. Okay, we're good. So let's say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kivtanu v'tzivanu na'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so we're picking it up at the paragraph which begins, so it was that the merchant was shown. Can I get a volunteer to read?
I'll read.
Okay, Marilyn.
So it was that the merchant was shown to the chamber of the 12 ladies in waiting, who were delighted to see him. He took out one dress for each of them, and when they saw how beautiful they were, they all rushed off to try the dresses on and to study themselves in the mirror. And thus they left the merchant alone in that room. He looked around, saw that one door had 7 locks on it, and he knew that that must be the chamber of the lost princess. He hurried to that door and took out the golden key that the second giant had given him. With the key, he quickly opened all 7 locks and went into the room. There he saw the lost princess sitting at the window and sobbing over her fate. She was very surprised to see anyone at all, for she was kept apart even from her ladies in waiting. And when the minister saw that she did not recognize him in his disguise, he took out of his pocket the scarf she had left with him, on which she had written with her tears. And when the lost princess saw this, she knew that the minister had found her at last, and she embraced him and wept tears of joy. Then the minister said, "Come, let us hurry and depart the palace before the ladies in waiting return." "Alas," said the princess, "we cannot escape that way, for the evil one has cast a spell so that it cannot be broken as long as my feet or those of my rescuer touch the ground. And it's the spell that is keeping me captive here, even more than the 7 locks on the door which you have somehow opened."
Okay. So this is pretty complicated, but I think some things are going to be clear. So let's start with the notion of the 7 locks. What do you think the 7 locks refer to?
Well, 7 is certainly days of the week.
Right, you would think that that's, the most immediate reference.
Aren't there 7 deadly sins?
That's true. Number 7 pops up in a lot of different contexts. The 7 deadly sins are one of the ways in which that number 7 pops up. The days a week is probably the more immediate reference here. But what is
the counting of the Omer?
The counting of the Omer?
Have we named the
Would
7
be
levels of
7
hell?
weeks.
That's right. It's 7 weeks of 7 days. Right. Very good. Very good.
What about the 7 levels of hell?
Well, that's an interesting idea too. Yeah, we can multiply different examples of how the number 7 is used. But I want to look particularly at why 7 here is connected with this notion of the locks. What is it that the 7 locks are protecting or distinguishing?
Well, there are 7 lower sefirot before you get up to approaching the ineffable, the Ein Sof.
Right. So there are 7 levels the one moves through in order to get to that highest level. That's a very good point, Michael.
And so I have a related question, which is, does the number 7 appear at all in any of the Mussar traditions as the number of aspects or a multiple of the number of aspects of ourselves that are worth examining.
Well, the traditional number of the midot is not 7. However, I think what we're looking here is how we were working last week on this notion of time, and the 7 locks on the 7 doors suggest something about time and what has to be done to time. What is it that we have to do if we're going to move through these lower levels to higher and higher levels? What is it that we are aiming to do in terms of our personal development? You got it?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody?
Okay, yeah, so there was, this is going to seem a little bit of a diversion, but there was something in the Talmud we read about going up a ladder to the roof of a house and going away from the ground.
Yes.
And there seems to be something in Judaism where we want to leave the ground.
Yeah, there is the very famous image of the dream of the patriarch Jacob, who sees a
Jacob's
ladder
ladder, yeah.
stretches from the earth to heaven. And what's happening with that ladder?
Well, I've seen sculptures of it
Okay.
many years ago, Jacob's ladder, and it always impressed me. But
Angels going up and down the ladder.
They're angels that go up and down the ladder. The rabbis have discussions about whether or not it starts by angels coming down and then going up, or going up and then coming down, which is an interesting kind of question to ask. But minimally, there are, this is the image is one of how the different realms, the earthly realm and the divine realm, are linked. And that there are, in fact, this is not a static situation. If you think about this in terms of personal development or spiritual development, what is suggested by this idea that the angels connecting these two realms go up and down continually?
well, they connect us to the eternal.
Right, but if
it's
to
not
me
done
you
in a
go up and
static.
down, then
Right.
what's the nature of that link? Is it
But
static?
it's
or
not
dynamic?
static. It's not static. It's dynamic, and
Right.
the elements would be changing inside us all the time, and we have to be adaptable to how they're changing.
Exactly. Like that's hitting the nail exactly right on the head. I mean, the point being that we might be tempted to think that development is a one-way street, or it's a kind of linear progression. But in reality, it's not. There are times when we backtrack, or we lose some of the advancement we've made in certain aspects of our personal development. Or
Yeah, I've been fascinated by the fact that the Dalai Lama needs to meditate 4 hours a day.
yeah, why does he need to do that? I mean, he's the Dalai Lama, for crying out loud.
Judith is going to tell us why.
No, I didn't raise my hand. I was going up.
Oh,
We go up and we go down not only every day but every week. And does this also have anything to do with the 7th year where we leave our fields fallow and
Sure, this is significance of number 7. So yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about the various levels in which the number 7 applies, it's something that applies in terms of nature or the physical universe as well. So yeah, I mean, this is not a static process. We make progress, we do backsliding, we get off track. You know, this is spiritual development is not a one-way linear process. And that is something to bear in mind, because I think part of the frustration that many people have when they try to think about what does it mean? What do I have to do? How do I improve? How do I learn? How do I grow? We get frustrated or we get disappointed because we think that, you know, each time we take a step in one direction, that's it. But that's not it. You know, you think about let's take an example of one midah. Let's take the example of fear or anger. You know, one day or one period, we somehow overcome feelings of anger that we have. And then on another occasion, we seem to be back where we started.
Right.
That's the way it goes. You know, if you're not aware of that and you don't have a place in the way you think about the process for digression or lack of success and so forth, you don't get anywhere. So I think in part what's being talked about here is that there are 7 days and they have to be unlocked. And even when they're unlocked, what do we discover?
Well,
That there's something more to come.
Something more to come, yes.
you have to leave the ground.
Sorry?
You have to leave the ground. You have to leave the earth.
Yeah, and which is exactly what the princess says, that as long as they're touching the ground, that they're not going to make any progress in becoming released. But the truth is that although we are not in contact with the ground, that is to say, we have somehow surmounted or gained a victory over our earth-bounded natures, that is not something that is, how should I put it, without loss. You know, this happens at all sorts of levels. I'll give you an example of one level that, you know, just out of my own personal life. When I had 2 separate bouts of cellulitis, and one of the things that happened when you get cellulitis is, if you have a serious instance of it, is that the tiny little, I don't know what you'd call them, the little parts of the circulatory system that prevent the blood from going backwards stop working. So you wind up with all sorts of problems because your circulatory system is not working the way it's supposed to. Even in the physical universe, in the world of nature and so forth, things are not all in line. They are not a straightforward progression from one day to the next, or 1 hour to the next, or even 1 minute to the next. That is part of the situation. And somehow you have to make room for that reality in understanding what it is that we're doing in trying to advance spiritually or in terms of psychological growth or what have you. There will be backsliding. Now, not to put too fine a point on it, but the biblical story about the relationship between Israel, the people Israel, and God is a story of what? There's constant backsliding. Every time the Israelites as a people take a positive step in one direction, then there's backsliding. I mean, it happens again and again in the story of the people and its relationship with God. It happens in terms of ourselves as individuals. It would be lovely if this only works in one direction, but it doesn't. that is part of what we have to contend with. So,
Helen has her hand up.
oh, I'm sorry. Yes. What do you have to say?
So I was also thinking of a story that didn't necessarily, I mean, it doesn't have to do with spiritual growth, but I believe it's in Second Samuel. It's in one of the books of the prophet, where there's a priest who's instructed to go to Jerusalem, but he cannot come back the same way he went there.
Uh-huh.
And he goes and, you know, he eats in the man's house and it's getting late. And the only way home is the long way. So he decides to go back the way that he had gone there. And he falls into a pit and gets eaten by a lion.
Oh, okay. And
But it kind of makes me think of these recurring theme of
uh-huh.
that ultimately they must take a different route than the route that they got there.
Isn't that interesting? You know, you would say, well, why don't I just retrace my steps? What's the answer? Why don't we just retrace our steps?
I mean, I'm kind of thinking that if we're meant to think that this is some sort of version of hell or purgatory or evil place, they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Right.
That if you've done something to get down here, that you wouldn't necessarily be able to go the same route, the same moral route that you went to get there, to get out.
Let's look at that in the context of the number 7. So there's 7 days in the week. Now, we're not talking about Shabbat here yet. But what do we have to do in order for us to make personal, spiritual progress? What does that have to do with the image of unlocking each of the days?
Well, you have to work with the dirt for 6 days.
Yeah.
But then the 7th day, you're leaving the dirt, you're leaving the earth.
And
you're not allowed to work is like touching the earth, working with the earth.
Okay.
Most of these people were farmers.
And once you do that and you have gone through the Shabbat, then what happens? Where do you go? Do you remain on the level of being Yom Shekulo Shabbat, the day in which?
No, you go back to the earth Monday.
We go back to the earth, yeah. We go through the process again. Are we?
Michael wants to talk.
Oh yeah, Michael. Okay.
So I had 2 things I wanted to talk about. First off,
Okay.
I remember speaking to a good friend of mine about the number 7 and its significance.
Okay.
And in multiple cultures, but we're obviously talking about it in this sense, but it is approximately a 28-day lunar cycle.
Right.
And 28 has 4 phases, each of which is 7. And
Yes.
that's why 7 has become sort of prominent in many cultures.
Yes.
But the unique characteristic of the phase of the moon at each day. And it's important to pay attention to that. And so I think the days of the week have specific names. I mean, in Hebrew, it's day 1, day 2, day 3.
Right.
But our job is to unlock the uniqueness of each day. There's something about today that's different and precious from every other day. And we only move forward in the spiritual quest if we can unlock that specialness, not of the abstract day 1, but of today.
So tell me, Michael, because I think this is a very interesting direction to take the conversation. What does it mean when we say, or the story says, that the days are, or each of the ladies in waiting, that it's all locked? Locked how? What kind of key do you need to unlock it? What is the point of unlocking it? What is it that you find or encounter once you have unlocked this particular day or the next particular day, and so on and so forth.
I don't know. It's sure interesting that even unlocked, you don't get there.
That's true. That could be.
But it is,
And
but
we
it is,
think like,
but it is on the way.
so I think that if when I through with high school and go to college, or when I get married, or when I get a full-time job, all these things, and then you realize that's not it.
Well, of course, the point is that it never is it. There's no it. There's no stage that you reach, which is the end. You know, whether it's
tell you a little anecdote, if I may. So one of the companies that I worked for was a startup company, and I was always envious of a few, you know, we would have our weekly meetings, but several layers up in the management chain, they would have their special meetings. And I was always of the opinion that, oh my God, they're talking about this profound strategic stuff and all of these great things. And
but they weren't.
and well, one day my boss wasn't there, and he said, "Why don't you go to that meeting?" And I went to the meeting, and it was like an ordinary meeting, and it was such a revelation to me that.
What did you discover, Michael?
As opposed to what Kim said, each one of these days and the opening of it is the whole thing. There is no more, and we end up putting ourselves in positions of tsuris, of angst, by keeping imagining that just around that corner, just that next meal, just that next mate I'm going to meet. And none of those things are actually it. But
no, they're not. And this is an important concept. And I'm going to mention a term that I don't know that I 100% understand in all its sophistication and so forth. But I'm going to refer to the concept of a fractal. Does anybody know what a fractal is?
Yes.
What is a fractal?
At whatever level of magnification you look at it, it's still the same.
Right. The image that you see contains all the possibilities, and it's not as if that you exhaust the implications of the meaning. What you in fact find is that everything is there. Mm-hmm. Is that a fair statement, Michael?
Yeah, I think that's close enough. Yeah, for the purposes of this. So,
well, to me, this is very similar to the idea of a kaleidoscope. You know, that and in fact, the rabbis use this image. That is to say, in Rabbi Ben Bagbag, one of the all-time great rabbinic names, says, speaking of the Torah, turn it and turn it because everything is in it. And what he means, I think, is that there is an unlimited number of possibilities within this, not just, I'm going to say document, but it's the collection of letters and spaces and so on and so forth. All of this has everything within it. Mm-hmm. In that sense, it's kind of like the fractal. I mean, what I'm trying to explain or express, I should say, is that we come to a particular image or particular understanding or particular interpretation, but that is never the end, because even that particular image or interpretation has within it an infinite number of other possibilities.
Which is why the Dalai Lama has to meditate 4 hours every day.
Exactly. That was exactly my point, Michael. It's why we read the Torah from beginning to end every year. We already read that. Yes. We'll have to read it again because there's something else there that, by definition, you haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
And so whether it's the Dalai Lama meditating for 4 hours every day, or, the rabbi, or not even a rabbi, the student of Torah, discovering something new in the text that had been there, but escaped our attention for whatever reason. And now we have a new level of understanding, and even that doesn't end the process. It's like an infinite, well, I don't know about regression, but an infinite process. There is no end to it. That's that's what it means to say that a text is a holy text. But it's not just about texts, it's about people. Each of us as individuals has an unlimited set of possibilities. And when we think we have sort of cornered the understanding of who this one person is or who we ourselves are, we discover that there's a bunch of stuff we just missed the first time through, or the 28th time through, or whatever. That's a key concept in understanding spiritual development.
And even if you understand it, you still have to do it.
That's right.
The
That's
understanding
exactly
of it
right.
doesn't matter. You still have to unopen the lock.
That's right. Exactly. So we are constantly looking inside of things and discovering that there's something there that we didn't know was there before. That's what life is like. I mean, that, not just our own personal program, but it's what life is like. It's like saying, okay, how do I put it? This idea, say, of the story of creation, which is the infinite unfolding of the differentiation of animals and plants and so on and so forth. There's no end to the process of new entities that come into the world.
So I'd like to say something.
Yeah.
So something I read today, and I don't know where it was, that you're supposed to read the Torah every 3 days. Does this make any sense? That the Torah is supposed to be...
There's a formal reading on Mondays and Thursdays and Shabbat.
Right. Oh, okay. And what's
on
really
Mondays,
neat...
And you read a part of the Parsha on Monday and part of it on Thursday.
Oh, neat. Okay, so...
Thing on Shabbos.
So if we read it every day, I mean, which you also do.
Right.
But, formally, you wouldn't have a chance to forget and to get lost and be found. It's not like, that would almost be like every day being a Sabbath. There has to be this process of getting lost in order to get found.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Like you have to be hungry in order to eat. That kind of thing.
I only wish that were true, but.
And I was working, earlier today, I was working with my trainer, and I was saying, so why do we do 3 repetitions of everything? And she said, you don't build any muscle till the 3rd time when your muscles get tired, and then there's a message going to your brain, and the brain starts to build new muscle cells. And I thought, that was really neat, that combination that you have to get in trouble over and over again. And I'm watching this series called Shameless, where they keep failing and then figuring it out. I don't know if any of you have seen it. There's 10 years on Netflix, but it's a family in the ghetto in Chicago, and they're wonderful people, but they keep getting lost, and they keep doing exactly the wrong thing and then exactly the right thing, and it goes on and on and on.
Huh.
I'm
it sounds interesting.
Eighth year. Yes, wonderful.
All right. Thank you.
My second time through. Okay.
Yeah.
Shameless.
Well, I think that this idea that within something that we say is holy, what that means is that there is an unlimited number of components, if you want to call them that, elements that we only partially see at any one time. And the more we go back to it, the more we see as parts of that initial reality. And we are constantly mining it. That's what it means to say that a text is holy. It's what it means to say that a person is holy. There is no end to the outcomes that are new and challenging and possibilities that we hadn't seen before, which is why our spouses get pissed at us if we say, "Oh, I know you. That's the way you are." If you want to have an argument with your husband or your wife, all you have to do is say something like that. That'll start you off. So, looking at these 7 ladies in waiting, they're dressed in these beautiful dresses, but what do we have to do? You can't stop just at looking at the dress. You have to look at what's inside. You have to unlock it. You have to see, what is it that we missed the first time? What is it that's there that was hidden or covered from our view? This is something that happens in all sorts of ways. I'll give you an example. Why is there a curtain in front of the Torahs in the Ark? Even going back to the days of the temple, why was there a curtain in front of the altar?
They didn't get dusty.
Well, okay.
Because if it gets dusty, then you have to dust it again and again and again.
But it kind of relates to the 3-day thing that you have to
through this curtain. Maimonides talks about this, that there is a kind of element that obscures our view of God's truth or the meaning of Torah, however you want to describe it. And it's, by definition, we as human beings are constantly looking through a curtain, or as Maimonides often refers to it, as a lattice work. And so you see some part of what is really there, but there are other parts that are obscured from our view.
So is the curtain not supposed to be opaque?
No. You can see through it, which is the way it is at Beth Israel. I mean, I don't know that they're always like that, but the idea is that there is something that gets between us and the Torah itself. We have to somehow get through or around it in order to see the Torah. It is partially obscured. It goes back to the image of the cloud at the top of Mount Sinai, within which God gives the Torah to Moses. We can't see it. We don't know how this process takes place. And that's kind of the point. So if we were to ask ourselves the question, how do we understand who we are, or who anyone we come into contact is? We might think we know who we are. We might think we know who a certain person is, but the truth is that to some degree, our view of ourselves, of other people, et cetera, is obscured. As you might say in the New Testament, through a glass darkly. We don't see something 100% directly. We see through something that obscures our view. That is in part what it means to be reading Torah, what it means to be reading somebody's character, including our own. There is something, all right, somebody's ringing my doorbell. I'm not sure I understand why, but I will find out who it is. I'll be right back.
You're not going to be happy about that, are you?
Okay, thank you. All right, fella. Take it easy. All right.
Okay.
They're just delivering my meal. They're a little bit early. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
This is sort of like when we fall in love, if we're lucky,
Yeah.
we see somebody in a totally different way than we saw that person before, or as we see that person 60 years later. So.
Yes. And and if you have a true love, what enables you to stay with that person for many, many years?
Well, we accept that the cloud that we were in of passion and love and all that stuff isn't really real. But the person one is in love with has faults, as do we, and we love them anyhow.
Yes, and even though we know that the person we're in love with is not identical to the image we have of them.
Right.
They are more complicated than that. If we try to reduce our husbands or our wives or whoever it is that we are in love with, or our kids or whatever, we get into trouble when we think, well, we've got everything about this person in mind. We understand everything about them, and there are no surprises. There are always surprises because there are always things to discover that we were not aware of before. That's that sense of surprise, of discovery, is what separates a truly loving or surprising sort of relationship from something else. What it means to say that, what I mean to say is that, we can read a story like the Exodus, let's say, from the Tanakh, and it's not just that we notice that it's a complex story, which it certainly is, but that we are constantly discovering things that surprise us about the story. We are constantly discovering things that surprise us about the people that we are in relationship with. I didn't know that you felt that way. I didn't know that you could be interested in doing that. I had a point at which I said to Linda, I think it would be great if we took lessons in ballroom dancing. She said, ballroom dancing? You like ballroom dancing? I said, well, I think I do. It'd be fun to do that. I mean, there's constantly things that we were unaware of, that were there all the time. And being unlocked is about having the opportunity to express those things that are otherwise in on the level of being hidden. I think that's what, if I'm going to make a suggestion about what unlocking the 7 locks that protect the ladies in waiting, what does that suggest? I think it suggests that spiritual development is for all of us the process of opening up, unlocking what is right in front of us, which is obscured from our point of view, in part because we think we've already got it. But if you suggest to yourself or to others that maybe there are elements to this reality that I don't know, that I'm not familiar with, that I have not encountered, that's when you are open to change. So I think that this idea of unlocking these 7 locks is a very, very powerful idea. And when we, and unlocking these 7 locks has to do with surmounting our groundedness, being able to rise above, literally rise above the everyday experience that we normally use to shield our view from what it is that we're actually looking at. So I think that this is a very powerful sort of idea.
Which
But
if rising above relates to they can't get out of there unless if their feet touch the ground.
yeah, and why is that, do you think?
The ground is so ordinary.
Well, ordinary is part of it, I think. Yeah, but let's broaden that a little bit. Ordinary meaning what? Ordinary meaning that there are no possibilities, there are no elements that we haven't already taken account of.
Right. There's more potential always.
Yes, it's about potential. It's about surprise. It's about the possibility that there are things that we are looking at, but which we don't see. There are relationships that we encounter, but we don't fully appreciate what they are. This is, so part of spiritual development, it seems to me, is allowing ourselves to experience the the indeterminacy of life, or to experience the indeterminacy of what occurs to us, to our point of view, so forth. The idea is that if we think that we know everything about X, whatever X happens to be, then growth is not possible. Development is not possible. In order for growth and development to take place, we have to adopt the position that we don't know everything that's there, which is a very challenging position to be in. So I guess what I'm saying is that this metaphor of unlocking the 7 locks is a crucial element of the story. And it's the step that allows us to see what some possibilities are for the future. Does that make sense to anybody?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, then I guess we're in a good place for today. And
I'm just curious about one thing.
okay, just one. All right.
No, not just one, but it seems like the earth is getting kind of a bad name here. Like we want to rise above the earth in Judaism.
Well, but don't forget that this is in the context of our going back to the earth, as it were, once the Sabbath is over. I mean, you go through the 7 days.
Yeah, and also you've spoken how the 6 days are not leaving, like leaving the spiritual side, but this is like in the back of your mind as you work. You're working for this purpose of.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that from the Jewish point of view, we don't really ever entirely leave the realm of the earth. We are always, we always return to it because time is not, we don't get to the divine realm and then that's where we stay. We are human beings and we go back to where we have come from, as in the expression, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. We don't fully shed the earthbound elements of our personalities or our characters. The question, I mean, we constantly go back, but hopefully we are making some progress at the same time. So it feels like we're back where we started from, but we're not entirely back where we started from. I guess that would be one way of putting it. Does that help?
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about this, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Have a good Shabbat.